Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Million Dollar Media. I am your host, Max Kellerhalls, and with me today we have
Darrell Franklin.
first time on the show,
Yes.
and one hell of a video to start off with. As you could tell from the thumbnail and title, and me constantly bringing it up every Superman trailer reaction I have, we are finally covering the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. So this won't be like just one particular movie. We're going to be covering all of them and just quickly going over just things we liked and the through lines throughout each of the movies that we liked about Christopher Reeve and that era of Superman and what we think still holds up and what we think... Before we get started, I guess we should say what our experience with like Superman is growing up or even now. What got you into Superman?
One of the things, and I know it's gonna sound similar to a Schneider fan, but actually hear me out on this one. Um,
Alright.
I'm usually on the side of not really loving Superman for the sake of like the newer comic writers try to like give him so much power that he becomes his own Mary Sue. Like the Golden Age comics type Superman to where it's still sci-fi and he still kind of has like his ability to solve the problems and make a DC comic feel more like a DC comic is kind of where I like it. And
Mm-hmm.
so like my experience with Superman is kind of nuanced up until like the Injustice series came out, and I'm just like I like that nuance, but I like the Injustice comics like depth into it more than like the game, because the game does
It doesn't.
like a surface level,
Yeah.
and then the comics kind of give like a I'm fed up with trying to be the good guy because I've tried so hard, and I think that's more reasonable than just trying to make it dark and gritty.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of have a nuanced experience about it. But then like the when the first teaser came out for James Gunn's Superman, I was
Yeah.
really impressed because I'm just like, oh, this feels like the comics again. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of swinging back the pendulum to the other side.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's interesting in that like I didn't really like Superman growing up because he was like the vanilla standard of what a superhero was in my opinion. Like
Right.
every other superhero was like a what if Superman but this, what if Superman but that. And then recently, as we got into like stuff like Invincible and The Boys, Brightburn, all these other things that take like the Superman myth and like spin it on its head and try to explore like what if Superman was evil. This is kind of getting old and boring. I don't know. There's nothing really to explore at that
Right.
point. And so what I appreciated just going back to the Superman stuff, it's kind of interesting to look at it and be like, oh no, like there's something special and unique about this character as he is. Just the nice guy and how important that is.
I think there's this kind of thing to where when people kind of talk about or like put Superman in things, we kind of forget the Clark Kent of him. And I might
Mm.
reference this a little later, but like we kind of need to have the full character rather than just like how strong you are. And I want to kind of blame that on like just the recent trend of like power scaling and everything, and just trying to make sure that somebody's super powerful rather than just like how the power also defines them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think highlighting how the character is just as important as how spectacular the character is.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, you're very much right. And I think another thing that kind of got me into Superman a little bit, going off what you said about like power scaling and stuff like that, is growing up with the death battles. I don't know if you ever watched Death Battle on
Hmm.
YouTube, but the Goku versus Superman video, and that was the first time I actually got to like, weirdly enough, what Superman is supposed to be about
Right.
in difference to other characters, because it's not about like becoming stronger. It's all about like using your strength
Yeah.
in good ways and helping people. Like there's something very special about that idea. And yeah, like it's fun to like debate Goku versus Superman. I'd admit it. But
Right.
at the end of the day, it's just like nerdy debates. It's like if you like both characters, you like both characters.
Yeah.
Just to kind of like move into our main topic here, I think that the first Superman the movie does a perfect job of setting up the gold standard version of Superman.
Yeah, I think I would even go further to say that it kind of does a good job of setting up what the superhero movie genre is,
Oh yeah.
especially in like the beginning sequences of it to where it feels like sci-fi of its time, of like
Oh yeah.
70s 80s sci-fi, to where it's like
Yes.
yeah, you have like this long 40 minute 1 hour introduction of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to like emulate that same, almost like how the what's the Blade Runner movies
Oh yeah, yeah,
starts.
yeah, yeah.
it's like it seems like it's dragging on really slow, but part of that is because this is how sci-fi world building was at the time. Once you kind of get past that point, you jump into the comic world, and I think it did a good job of trying to like both merge the genre and try to set it up so that the future movies could be what they are. At the same time, it does set Superman in a way to where like you can have the whimsy of him when he's like in his character, but at the same time you still see that there's a world around him that he has to interact with.
It's interesting because yes, like I don't know what it is, but like the aesthetic they set up of Krypton is very like it still holds up in my opinion. Like
Right.
the crystalline look, the all white outfits and stuff like that. I'm like,
Right.
oh, this is actually pretty interesting. And I mean, we gotta also talk about the fact that like Marlon Brando plays Jor-El, and that was like a big deal for the time. But upon watching it, you're like, is he awake?
Right. When a lot of people talk about like superhero movies, like of course you have to think about like late 2000s and 2010s era because that becomes a golden age. But
yeah,
I think we wouldn't be as keen to it without this kind of first Superman movie that allows one sci-fi to be like this now, and that allows like superheroes to kind of be comical in a way.
What do you mean by more comical? Like more rooted in the comics? I'm curious what you mean by that. Like more comical.
Kind of both ways of what like kind of feeling like a comic book because like as every media does, it kind of goes through this phase of like what age range is comics trying to go for, or like where they're trying to like market to, and like kind of still be at the same time kind of understand that like you're in a bizarre whimsical world, and you get to just experience that for what it is rather than just making it super like gloomy and like super serious and make it so much of a commentary, because comics themselves, even with their whimsy, is like they're always a commentary about something.
Even the original like Joel Shuster, Jerry Siegel comics.
Yeah.
Though they had something to say, like Superman in the comics, like the first couple comics, he was like a big on unions and stuff like that. He was for unions and stuff, and it's kind of interesting how they're bringing that now back into the comics. But like, yeah, they've always had something to say, and I think like, I mean, it's interesting what you can get out of this movie about what it's trying to say. But at the end of the day, I think it's just like a nice little romp and adventure with a very lovable main character, and in my opinion, villains that are kind of weak.
Right.
We'll get to the big man in a minute, but like, just not around the villains thing. What did you think of Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor?
I think it's an interesting take.
It is.
Because, especially with like DC animated movies that we see, like Lex is in a certain way. Even in the Snyderverse, like Lex is a certain way. Like we kind of getting this both like funny, but also like snarky. Lex just there just because he has influence. Like his power is just his influence. It's not even his money. He's not bribing people.
Well, that's the thing. Like what I kind of don't like about this version is that I don't really know what he is. He says like, I am the genius criminal mastermind that in the 20th century. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I mean, when you surround yourself by Otis and Miss Tessmacher, like, you kind of, I don't know. It just, he never came across as threatening. He just kind of came across as like a really manipulative salesman.
Right. He has like the resources to do things, but just the execution lacks.
Yeah.
And so it does what it needs to do, especially for these renditions of Superman. But obviously, like especially in the comics, and especially as like Lex's character develops more, he's kind of supposed to be more like cunning and kind of like teetering on the line between like, am I a villain or am I just somebody who has my own interests in mind? And sometimes those interests can work with Superman. But I think for the sake of like a movie, especially in the late 70s, it's just like make the bad guy bad for the sake of being the bad guy.
I wasn't a big fan of that interpretation. I mean, it's Gene Hackman, so he's given it his all, but I'm just thinking like, nothing spoke out to me as Lex Luthor in any way. The Lex Luthor that I read in the comics and seen in the animated stuff. And hell, even like from what I've seen in the new trailer, I'm like, that looks more like Lex Luthor. I mean, it's funny because like, he reveals like, oh, the hair that he has this entire time was a wig. Right. And then I kind of question myself, so you purposely gave yourself a receding hairline?
Right. Just to make it more believable.
Yeah, like, okay. Like, what's the reveal here? I mean, we gotta talk about the big man, Christopher Reeve as Superman. He's so good.
Like he was a great standard to set for a filmed Superman. Like, and it's kind of like I said earlier, it's like he kind of has a focus on both Clark and Superman.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see that struggle, especially when he's dealing with Lois and then a little bit with Lana. That
Oh, yeah.
he's teetering back and forth between like, I know I can get anything I want as Superman, but I want to see like the way I was raised if I can still do those same things. And they kind of go a little overboard in 3 with him like choking Dark Superman out in the middle of a junkyard. But
yes.
I find it that he does a really good job of trying to make sure that those two characters, although like we know intrinsically that this is the same person, but they are two different characters that you can kind of look at on their own.
No, yeah, I very much agree with you on that. And one thing upon rewatching all the movies now, is I kind of like the idea that Superman likes being Clark Kent more than Superman, which I found was really interesting in that, like, he prefers to be this bumbling, dorky reporter guy who's second fiddle to, like, Lois. He likes being that. He likes living as a human and kind of just seeing, like, how people treat him differently when, like, all he has to do is take off the glasses. And, like, yes, is it ridiculous that, like, all you have to do is take off the glasses and you're now Superman? But, like, just thinking nowadays and how we really don't pay attention to stuff.
Yeah.
And also how Christopher Reeve, like, plays both characters so different. I buy it. I would be like, oh yeah, that's Superman, that's Clark.
It just makes it more of a compelling story. It makes you care about them in a different light. And I think part of that is the reason why I started to dislike Superman, because Clark didn't feel real. It just felt like Superman is more of this entity than it is a character.
Yeah, I think what makes a good Superman movie good is that you have to nail down both. Like, you have to nail the Clark personality down. It's specifically the Clark personality that he is in the Daily Planet. And I feel like if you don't nail that, the movie wouldn't work. And I feel like Christopher Reeve and Dick Donner understood the assignment and was like, okay, what is it about this character that he has to play these two different versions of himself? And they always talk about that one moment where, like, it's after he goes flying with Lois and he's about to reveal he is Superman to Lois. And you just see, like, the change. There's no effects. There's no, like, digital smoothing or, like, warp effect. It's just an actor going from one person to another, and you just buy it. And it's charming. I liked watching a lot of the Clark stuff upon doing this rewatch. Yeah. Because it was more fascinating than some of the Superman stuff, because I feel like if I had any negative of any of these movies going forward, my through line negative is I don't like it when they just randomly give Superman powers like that he shouldn't have. Like, just telekinesis or the ability to, like, look at the Great Wall of China and rebuild it. Like, that's the stuff of Superman that people don't like, is that when you just make him, like, God level and he can just do anything. Like, the Superman stuff I like, and that is in this movie, is when he has to use the powers that he does have in really fun and creative ways. Like, okay, I gotta get down there. I'll just spin around real quick and drill myself down. Right. Like, that's fun. That's, like, campy. That's fun. I like that kind of stuff. But, like, I mean, if we want to kind of get into the big one in this movie, it's the circumnavigating the globe.
Which, like, you hear about often. Like, if you talk about Superman long enough, you're going to hear about that.
Oh, of course. It's the thing. Flew around the world so fast you'd reverse time. Which...
like... Which is very... It's like, you know, it's 70s, 80s sci-fi. Like, that's... In the sense of that, it's like a really, really, really cool, like, just feat just to do that. I don't think they were thinking about, like, power scaling. I think they were thinking about just, like how is he going to save the day when the day can't be saved now?
Oh, yeah.
And I think in that sense, you can appreciate it, but, like, in the sense of, like, now to where, like, characters are built, like, for decades, and, like we're nearing a century of some of these characters just even existing. Like, now it's all about, like, what are the feats versus, like, why did the feat happen? Yeah.
And to be fair, like, I think actually watching the movie and having that scene in context, it's a little bit lessened about, like, this is ridiculous, and more like, I mean, if he could, he would go back in time to save Lois. Like, that makes sense. And that scene where he, like, he's done all this hard work, he, like, cleverly fixed a way to stop that town from flooding, he lifted a tectonic plate.
Yeah.
Like, and as that's more believable than rewinding time.
Right.
But, like, the moment, like, all that hard work, and then the one person that he actually cares about dies.
Mm-hmm.
I could see how, like, he would be so pissed to do that. And that moment where he, like, screams and, like, Christopher Reeve just brought it in that scene. You just were like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why he would, like, he's just so enraged that he just does this thing. And part of me thinks, like, did he know he could do that, or was he just doing it?
Right. And I think part of it, just to, like, suspend the disbelief, is that, like, you know, when he's a teen and he first goes to the Fortress of Solitude, and we just have, like, a time skip that just implies that he's had the powers.
Yes.
And I think, like, maybe he could have known, but, like, that's a really, really far stretching thing.
I think there's one line where they imply, like, you're not supposed to, like, interfere with, like, historical events.
Right.
And, I mean, if you want to look at it now, maybe he has the Speed Force with, like, modern day, like, comic book knowledge, but that's not what they were thinking.
Right.
Like, if you want to read it like that, you can, but it's not that.
There is where, like, Superman becomes frustrating.
Uh-huh.
Outside of, like, really doing character study of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's... To be fair, I feel like the next couple movies have equal to or more ridiculous shit that he does. Mm-hmm. I guess we could kind of move on to the second film, because, man, is there a lot to say.
I want to start off with, it is my least favorite out of them.
Really?
Yes. Mainly because of how they fixed the solution of him giving up his powers.
Oh yeah.
Like it seemed like it seemed really inconsequential. Like with that whole thing, and then it's just like, oh, the other Kryptonians are here. Let me just happen to be very, very lucky with this, like, one little gem inside of the fortress, and we're all good.
To be fair, they did set up earlier that when Lex Luthor was messing with the crystals, he threw one away. Like, that's not that interesting. And so I'm like, okay, they set that up in an interesting way.
Yeah.
I can understand, like, yes, they're wanting to do a story about, like, hey, what if, like, Superman were to be mortal for, like, a day? Like, if he could give up everything and retire, what would that be like for him? Like,
right.
And why would he do that? And it's for Lois. And honestly, the things that I do like about this movie, and it kind of makes that whole subplot work, is that the relationship between him and Lois in this movie is probably better than what it was in the first.
I agree. The same thing makes me upset with the movie, because, like, it was showing towards the beginning that, like, Lois really was, like, more wooed by, like, oh, Superman likes me. Oh, Superman likes me.
Okay, yeah.
Still, like, hasn't pieced it together yet. And then it wasn't until, like she when she, like, throws herself into the water.
That shit was so funny. I love when Clark Kent has to figure out a way to save the day. Yeah. Where he's like, oh, I can't change because then she's proven right.
Right.
But I have to save her, so branch.
I honestly, okay, this might be a slight tangent, but I honestly like Kidder's Lois.
Oh yeah, she's great.
A lot.
She's so good.
I think a lot of people get Lois wrong by just being like, you know, she's Superman's girlfriend, Superman's wife, unlike in other places, to where she just becomes just like something that Superman needs to save. Like Lois, especially in these films, obviously gets into situations to where, like, she is rescued, but it's not because that, like, it's because she's an asset that we need to get to Superman to. It's because like she is like almost braver than him sometimes.
Oh yeah, you get that feeling a lot. I mean, like the opening to this movie with, like, the Eiffel Tower, and her just being like, I'm gonna see if I could get a story out of this. Yeah. Like, that's the fun thing. Like, yeah, everybody makes fun of, like, the whole dynamic of, like, the woman has to be saved. She's the damsel in distress. Like, she puts herself in those situations. So the fun of it is, like, he has to keep getting her out because she knows, like, well, I got this, like, big safety net to help me out. Yeah. Which is very fun to watch and, like, see her kind of, like, I don't want to say manipulate the situation, but she is a reporter and she's like, well, like, if I know that I can get out of this situation safe, I'm going to go after it.
Right.
I don't know. I think Margot Kidder as Christopher Reeve is Superman. I think she's the gold standard of Lois.
Like it's very rare. It seems like when you see IPs like Superman to where like the first version is
I
kind of the best
know.
version.
Yeah.
And like we still have yet to see with like the new movie, but
Yeah.
like this it just feels like, oh, I like this story, I like the characters, like
Hmm.
this kind of feels like this is how I would envision the characters, even like outside of like if I were to see them for the first time again.
I think maybe it's because before this there wasn't that much superhero content, and so that this was like we're taking a full on serious take on it. Not
Hmm.
serious in like the tone, but like in the ambition and trying to like actually make this work, and
Right.
not just like do the Batman 66 thing. Which, to be fair, people shit on Batman 66. That show is actually pretty fun, and it's still
Yeah.
Batman, but it is way goofier than what Batman has become.
Yeah, it's still giving into like the shift at the time. It's like, oh, kids like comics, you know.
Yes, yes, very much.
So it's doing what it's meant to do. It is both of its time, but it's still also like still doing right by the character, even if it is a lot sillier than what we think of Batman now.
And to be fair, this movie still has a lot of silly shit. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's one of the reasons why I don't really like it as much. And I
Mhm.
think it's also not because of the movie's fault. It's because the behind the scenes of it is really interesting. Do you know the behind the scenes of what happened here?
No.
Okay, so they filmed Superman and Superman 2 back to back,
Hmm.
but after Superman 1 was released, they fired Richard Donner because he went
Right.
over budget. And so they brought in Richard Lester,
Mm.
and they said like this will be your movie if you film 50% of it. So I feel like a lot of the problems that you and I have with like the side plot and the, in my opinion, like a lot of the weird hijinks that really don't need to be in there,
Right.
I think that's all Richard Lester, because a lot of the stuff that I don't like in this movie kind of continues on to the next movie.
Yeah, and you can tell like part one, like on the third movie, you can tell that like, you know, production went up because like now we have a franchise. It kind of took away from like, I don't want to say it's authentic in its own way. I don't want to say it took away from its authenticity, but it felt like a different Superman story. Like I still feel like Christopher Reeve still did his thing with the character, and I think that still keeps you engaged. But you can definitely tell that like it doesn't feel the same as the first two.
Not at all. Oh man, hold on. Can we go back to Superman 2 real quick before
Yeah.
go into Superman 3? Because we got to talk about the villains of Superman 2. Because if we're
Yes.
doing retrospectives and kind of showing like what stayed the same and what's different, I kind of like the Kryptonians in this version. They're very 70s and 80s. Actually, I'd say they're very
Yeah.
70s. Like the outfits are
100%.
crazy.
You know, actually, I agree with you. I can't even think of her name right now. But like her obsession with like collecting badges and putting it on her uniform.
Okay, that is a fun little detail. I like that. That's really cool.
That is one of my favorite details. I'm just like, oh, you can still tell like the character still feels alive in some way. It's not just like, you know, just a part of the group.
I mean, I'll compare like the Michael Shannon Zod to the Zod and the Kryptonians in Man of Steel. But what I like in this movie is that you just focus on three of them,
Yeah.
and they all have their own distinct personalities. Like Non
Right.
is just a brute who makes animal noises. Okay, I think that was a Richard Lester thing they added. And what you said with like Ursa, I think Ursa is like a really interesting character, and I also like. I mean, he's not a fleshed out villain like the Michael Shannon version.
Right.
But I still like Terrence Stamp's interpretation of Zod. I think it's really fun, and he's very imposing. You're like, I don't know if Superman can beat this guy.
And it feels like I almost want to go as far as saying that, like, you know, now there's almost a cliche trope at this point because we have so many of like the Superman like alien full like coming from a planet full of warriors.
Yes.
That like
yes.
like when one of the generals comes up, they're just like, these people are soft. Like, you call yourself a general? Like, that's I think I like that aspect of it because it is just kind of showing the stark difference of like how softened Superman is and how caring he is versus to like Kryptonians that just happen to land on the moon and just kill 3 cosmonauts.
Yeah. yes. Oh my god, that should not have been as funny as it was for me. It's probably have a sixth sense of humor, but like
Right.
the way they filmed that was like hilarious.
It was great.
It was good. It was really funny. Like it is funny too. Like the escalation. They land down in water and they're like, okay, let's just go see the nearby town. They destroy the nearby
Right.
town. Next thing you know, what? Let's just go attack the White House.
Right.
The escalation is really funny.
It's only the logical progression.
I
Of just
know.
like, we're powerful enough. Let's go after the White House.
And then they just by taking over the White House, they take over the world because
Right.
in this movie, America is the only country that matters.
And I love that. Just any
Yeah.
alien invasion, as long as you take over either New York or the White House,
Yeah.
you took over the world.
Yep, that's it. Or Metropolis in this version, which has a
Right.
Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah.
Apparently, I guess Metropolis is like supposed to be the Manhattan of DC.
I've heard different. I know that
Yeah.
Gotham takes place in New Jersey. I remember hearing somewhere that Metropolis is in Delaware, or like it's supposed to be in the Midwest.
Well, I think we know. I actually know because Smallville is Kansas for sure.
Yes, they say that
Yeah.
Smallville is Kansas.
Yeah. I feel like I get very confused with it because
I know.
they call the cities by nickname, but like I've heard Gotham is New Jersey, but now like I think real life New York has adopted Gotham.
Yeah, I know that New York and Los Angeles has been used for Metropolis, and that New York, L.A., Chicago, and now Glasgow has been used for Gotham.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. But besides that, like, I just have a couple questions about Superman 2, like the ending. Like, what did you think of the ending?
Again, like I still enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
I just like it's not the weakest of the movies. It's just my least
Yeah.
favorite of them. I think.
Yeah, I get that. It's very much a letdown after the last one.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will say about the ending, and I don't know how they can bring it back, but the one ridiculous power that Superman has in this is the cellophane S.
Yes.
Like,
Oh,
like
it's
it's so random.
I think they just have to give in to like. I mean, that feels like a comic page thing. Like just like, oh yeah, this '60s comic, Superman randomly has a tool that he can rip off his S and it can like literally capture you. But I think they were just kind of giving into that anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. To be fair, of all the powers that I'd want to see come back, that's one that I think would be really funny to have come back.
I think that's hilarious. I wouldn't put it past James Gunn to try to go into that.
Yeah, because I mean, like the new Batman, he could take off his emblem and use it as a knife, so it's not
Right.
like connection maybe.
And honestly, like if you look at like especially with like the longer teasers of it and like how you see the robots in the Fortress of Solitude and everything, like there's
yeah.
he's equipped with much more than we're used to seeing as of recent.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, we'll get into that whenever we talk about the new one when we do talk about it. But yeah, I guess we could kind of before we move on completely, I do have to point out like this movie has a director's cut.
Mm-hmm.
And just a couple of things that were changed for this. Instead of the French terrorist plot at the beginning of this movie that releases the Kryptonians, it's actually the bombs from the last movie.
Okay.
That he threw up into space. So you remember when like he picked up that one and then just like guided it into outer space?
Yeah.
That bomb released the Kryptonians. That's how they explain it in that version, which I actually kind of like. I think that's a really cool way to tie it together. Instead of Clark revealing himself by tripping and falling into fire and not being hurt, which I mean, you could pass it off. I'm gonna be real.
Yeah.
But otherwise, she shoots him with a blank, and he thinks it's like a real gun. So he's just like, oh, well, she shot me, and now I'm not dead. So
Wow.
yeah, that's it. So yeah,
That's funny.
I like that idea where she's like, I'm gonna pretend to shoot you with a gun.
I think it's also a callback to when like they are getting robbed in the alleyway in the first movie.
Yes, very much. I love that moment with him like looking at the camera.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
Yeah, actually, like, is that one of the only moments in all the movies that he does that?
If you don't count like at the end of all these movies, he like flies in the sky and looks at the camera and then
Right.
I guess that's it.
That I like that he breaks the fourth wall like mid like genuine plot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's not like it doesn't take me out. I think it's just kind of cheeky and funny. It's done well. Like
Yeah,
how at the end of every movie he flies into space and looks at the camera. I don't know. Whenever he does that, it's just like that's sweet.
right.
That's nice of him. And then I guess. Oh, and the big thing that they change is that, and I guess we can kind of talk about this. At the end of the original cut, Superman kisses Lois and she forgets everything, which that in its own is a creepy ass power.
It's like it's like a reverse Tamaranian power.
Yes. Oh my god. Yeah.
It's like instead of like learning from the person, it's just like just take whatever. Yeah, that's where you get into just like what can Superman not do?
Yeah, and other things I gotta say is just like in the fourth film, he does it again, meaning to imply that he will just reveal himself as Superman to Lois, get some advice, kiss her, and then she just forgets. Which, by the way, Clark, very wrong. Don't do that. That is very creepy.
Even Boy Scouts aren't perfect.
As a Boy Scout, yeah, that's true. That is very true. Instead of doing the kiss at the end of the original movie, they actually do the circumnavigating the globe thing. That's how she forgets. So originally, him going back in time was supposed to be used in the sequel, but because he got fired, they put it in the first film, and that's how he fixes that situation. But yeah, no, he was supposed to like turn around, like spin time around, and it's implied that Lois still vaguely remembers what's going on.
Right.
So, which kind of leads into what happens in Superman Returns with her being pregnant and having his kid.
Yeah.
Which is, again, that's even, especially with the memory wiping kiss, that's just, okay.
Yeah, that is that is very problematic.
Yeah, very much of its time.
I do, again, I know this is like another like Lois thing, but I do like that they're making Lois like just like super smart, even like with like she somewhat remembers or like implying that.
Yeah.
Like I think some other adapters of Superman and Lois specifically like make Lois more of like this kind of brash like I'll do what I want type of thing rather than like I'm smart, and if I get myself into trouble, that's a future me problem.
Yes, that well put. Yeah, that's so true. Figure like she can use clues in her like deductive and reporting, like her always trying to find an angle to get herself out of this really cosmic and wild situation. I think that's actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
And very much that like what you said with Lois, and that she's very like she will figure out the problem as it's going on. Yeah, I guess now we gotta talk about the films that are not as good. Which, you know what? I'll say this. Even though 3 and 4 are like not good, I don't mind 3. Like
yeah, 3 does a good job of trying to still stay true.
Yeah.
And then it loses itself a little bit.
But it very much like takes some weird detours. This movie had some painfully unfunny moments.
Oh yeah.
Richard Pryor's in this movie, and he's pretty much like the co-lead of this film.
Yeah.
Like he's a main character in this film alongside Superman. And I don't know how you can make Richard Pryor unfunny, but they did.
Yeah, that had to be a writing thing, because like when Richard Pryor writes his stuff, like it's phenomenal. But like
so good.
Richard Pryor's not afraid to lean into like corniness and still make it funny and ironic.
Oh yeah.
And I think they just kind of went too corny with the fact that like Superman's a comic book hero. So it didn't flop. I don't think it was like flop. I think there was like maybe. No, because even I'm trying to find a justification for it, but like even then, like the scene to where like he breaks into the computer company in Smallville and then has to do like the key thing, but he's also drunk, and like that whole thing. Like I know it was meant to be funnier than it actually was.
Yeah, that was Superman 2 not as profitable, so they were like, well, we gotta like put Superman and this other and a very funny comedian in this to make it work. I think he was in like Silver Streak or something like that. Whatever Richard Pryor was in, he might have been doing The Wiz at this time. Who knows? Yeah, it just didn't work. And the thing is like if you wanted to make like a funny Superman movie, Christopher Reeves is best friends with Robin Williams.
Right.
Which, and I would always said, like, I think another thing that lets these movies down is that, like, at this point, they just make their own villains and try to come up with their own stuff. Like, in this movie, you could have had Mr. Mitzelplick.
Yeah, Mrs. I think it's how you say it.
I don't know. I've heard it be said various different ways, and I think that's the point.
It's a very, very hard. That's also hard to do. Like, I almost don't even want James Gunn to go into that type of character because he's like a interdimensional being.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like the tone this movie and that these movies were setting up, I think it would have worked. Because, like, especially if we also had Robin Williams playing Mitzelplick, I think it would have, like, he could have played, like, a genie before the genie kind of idea.
Right.
Like, I think it would have worked a lot better. Him and Christopher Reeve are great friends. They could work well off each other.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, and then the main villain of the movie, like, it's crazy how close they are to making that villain Brainiac, but they just don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Brainiac is like tough territory as well. Like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League didn't even do Brainiac right.
Well, that game didn't do anything right.
I would go on a tangent about that like crazy, but like yeah. The Injustice games didn't even do Brainiac right. Like Brainiac is
he's a tough character to crack.
Yeah, he's a tough character to do, and it's like once you get to that point to where like you have like a powerhouse like Superman, you're trying to make it compelling more on the Superman side than the Clark side. That's where you kind of get that.
Well, I mean, what I can say is like I like the interpretation of Brainiac from like the animated series where he's like a AI from Krypton that kind of like fucks off once it blows up. Like, I think that, especially how this movie does the thing of like Clark goes back to the farm and goes back to Smallville. I don't know. It's interesting. You get to see a more comfortable version of Clark where he doesn't have to be as bumbling. Yeah. Because they all know what he was like in high school. They're just like, you know. So him just being like slightly more nerdy now, it makes sense. But I don't know. I've loved that stuff. And I think him and Lana's relationship is actually one of the things I really like about this movie. But just to continue on, like the idea of him going back to his roots in Smallville, I think it would have been interesting if like a thing from Krypton then came back and into his life. Yeah. I think that would have been interesting. Like these two things that are like his roots in Smallville and his roots on Krypton are now finally converging. And it would have been like a great way to cap the trilogy off. But they don't. I'm curious. Did you like the Lana Lane relationship in this?
It actually made me think about, even though it's very corny a lot of the times to me, it made me think about the Smallville show. Okay. Because I think, like, just kind of having that, just having him return to Smallville and just kind of, like, interact with people and there being a story there. Like, I like dialogue and interaction that, like, we don't need to have a flashback of what had happened. We are kind of, like, vicariously experiencing, like, years and years of relationship through their conversation and interaction. I think, Tarantino does that with Reservoir Dogs very well. Like you don't have to be in a flashback all the time because you're hearing what like how their relationship is and you can put those pieces together based on what they're saying. And I actually think that might be the most compelling part of Superman 3, that Smallville arc.
I agree. I think that is what makes me enjoy this movie more than 2. It's not as well made as 2 is at some points. Yeah. But like I love like the idea of going back to Smallville and everything that you said, but I also like there's this interesting theme of like alcoholism and like addiction. Yeah. Which I wasn't prepared for. And I was like, okay, they're actually saying something here. And like with him and the Tar Kryptonite stuff of like he becomes like a drunk and he's a dick. He blows out the Olympic flame, leans up the Tower of Pisa. Like
that was just beyond petty for no reason.
I loved it. I like that the idea of like this version of like evil Superman is just a petty dick or like a bad bar patron.
And then the following sequence of like him fighting himself.
I love that.
Like
it's
fun. Very interesting because the first thing that came to mind for me as of like recency things was like I guess I don't know. I'm not gonna put a spoiler warning for Steven Universe. But
go ahead.
Like that the sequence to where he's been battling White Diamond the whole time, and then he gets removed from himself to his gem self, and then he has to like convince his gem self to refuse with himself, and then win the day. That's how that kind of sequence in the junkyard and then him choking himself out seemed to me.
I loved it. I don't know. I liked it. I can't relate to the Steven Universe angle of it, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But, like, I just liked how, in that moment, like, Christopher Reeve is just selling it. Like, you buy both versions of, like... And it's interesting, too, because of, like, how much Clark is so important to Superman, and him having to fight his version of Superman who's just belittling him.
Yeah.
And you see why, like, Clark is the stronger person in this situation. He had, like, Superman wouldn't have his morals without Clark. Because it's just... Superman is just the power at that point. But Clark is the truth, is the justice, the better tomorrow stuff. Like, all that kind of stuff comes from Clark, and the way they ended with, like, him ripping the shirt off and just, he's still Superman. Like,
ironically, I think it's talking about the same problem that we keep talking about. Like, a lot of Superman writers forget Clark Kent. And I think that, like, a lot of the people who fall along the lines of, or like who love the school of just like, well, if Superman were real or a Superman character like this were real, this is how they would be. But that's also an indicator of like they can't separate themselves versus the persona. While Clark Kent is a intentional separation of the persona, both by like the writers and by Clark himself.
I have no notes on what you said. You're right. This movie does a better job handling Clark in that sense. And I think the third act just kind of teeters off after that fight. It's just like, and he fights a computer.
Right.
With a terrifying wig thing. That was kind of creepy.
Yeah. Very
much Brainiac too, but still, like, very creepy. Superman 4.
Yeah.
The first note I have here is, this sucked.
Yeah.
They gave up. I'm gonna be real. They just gave up. They're like, it's too difficult. We ran out of money.
Right.
We have one more in the tank, and this is it. This sucked.
And then Nuclear Man.
Dude. Oh my god, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was like, yeah, he kind of looks like Sentry.
There's a lot of people who kind of put that together.
Yeah, no. It's the hair, and oh my god, the hair.
Yeah. No, I'm not making any claim about either side of the major comic book world.
No, let's get controversial. Let's get controversial in this episode. That way, the Henry Cavill Snyderverse episode is less controversial.
I would love to go on a 10-hour rant of how I actually really enjoy MCU Sentry.
Oh yeah, well yeah. Watch our Thunderbird.
And how I hate Nuclear Man.
Well, okay. One is a well-developed mentally ill character. One is just not mentally there.
Right.
Again, like all the villains that he has, and you decide to make this weird glam rock, silver nails villain. I'm like, really? And he's got the lamest weakness of all time.
The same way that like you can tell when a TV show is dying off after like season 6. It's like, yes, comic books especially have a knack or affinity for like continuing that, like, what's the new adventure, because you can still stay true to who the character is, but it's hard to do that in the movie.
It is.
Because of budgets, because of director changes, because of writer changes, because of like a whole bunch of other things.
Hell, studio changes in this sense, because the last 3 were done by the Cyclones, and then this movie was given to the Canon Group, who are notorious for not giving movies the budgets they need. Yeah,
it's a weird kind of like...
It's got good intentions.
And, honestly, like, makes a character, or it uses a character that, like, has a potential of being formidable, but it doesn't feel that way. It just it feels forced all the way. You can tell it's just like, hey, Superman's really done everything, and we're bringing back Lex, but like we don't want to make it we don't want to change Lex too much. Let's go a different route.
Gene Hackman doesn't want to get in a robot suit.
Right.
I don't even know if that was a thing at this time, but even Gene Hackman, he's just like, I got the paycheck, I'm just fucking around.
Right.
And what I mean by it has good intentions is that they talk a lot about like the nuclear arms race, which watching this recently and then the shit that's going on in the real world at the time of recording is like, whoo! If only we had a Superman. But
We're close.
We're close. Christopher Reeve has always been like very politically minded, and he always has something to say. So I feel like he was like, I want to talk about nuclear power. But when you have the living embodiment of nuclear power look like that, and it also makes no sense because at the end of the movie he drops him into a nuclear power plant, and it like makes the city glow brighter and shit. I'm like, so what are we saying here? Or are you just like saying fuck it?
It's just it's an experiment, you know. Like you can't they can't all be home runs.
No, but yeah, this movie killed the Superman franchise for a while.
Yeah,
it is also interesting. Like we haven't talked about the Batman films yet, but it's interesting like how like the Michael Keaton era, the Tim Burton era, leading into like the Joel Schumacher like Bright Lights extravaganza.
Right.
Like, it's interesting how those films and these films are mirrored in that way. Like they start off like with a vision, with something to say, and then they just kind of divulge into lunacy.
Right. It seems like they, you know, the success. I wouldn't say the success is getting to them, but it's kind of like, oh wait, this worked, and then just trying so hard to like at first they're just like, this project looks promising. Let's do our best. Then it's just like, oh wait, this worked. Let's do this. Let's try to do this because this is what the people like. It's like, no, people like the thing that you made. Yeah. They don't like if you're trying to add too many ingredients, then you just ruin it.
Yeah. We didn't watch it, but I want to just bring up a couple things about Superman Returns just to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
I'll say this: for a movie surrounded by sex pests, you'd think it'd be more interesting.
This is where like. Zack Snyder was needed after this point. Like,
yeah, you can really blame this film for why we get what we're going to be talking about in the next video. Yeah,
I think that like it was looking at something that was 20 years before its time, and then trying to be like, well, I'm going to put my spin on it. Yeah, and it's not looking at the full thing. Like, it's also trying to oppress us away from Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Like, yeah. It's hard to compete as a superhero movie and a sci-fi action movie when, like, within the decade or like the decade of time within that you get The Matrix and Spider-Man.
Matrix, Spider-Man, X-Men, which the same director did.
Yeah, you can't flop in that kind of environment, and then the next year, then all of a sudden you're getting what, Iron Man, and then Christopher Nolan's Batman, and then Man of Steel, like those. Yeah. Now it's just like it's rough, full of diamonds, rough in the diamonds, you know.
Yeah. It's an interesting like benchmarking. Like, okay, there was this weird attempt to go back to this era because this is, for all intents and purposes, this is supposed to be the Chris Reeve, Margot Kidder, Gene Hackman, like Richard Donner universe. It's supposed to be a loving homage to that. It's the same versions, just with new actors who are young. And that being said, Brandon Routh is pretty damn good. I think he's a good Superman in a horrible movie. Yeah,
it's, you know, one, he had to fill large shoes that Christopher Reeve made. And then it's just like, you know, it wasn't a well-executed type of film.
Yeah. It's sad. It's boring to watch. And apparently, like, they were gonna, like, do more cool stuff with this. Like, they were gonna have Zod in the sequel, and they were gonna have, like... Apparently, they wanted to have, like, they're gonna do a third film with, like, Darkseid.
Whoa.
I'm like, that is a jump.
Yeah, that is ambitious.
But I'm like, why, if you wanted to do all that cool shit, why are you, like, restraining yourself with this bland story about him feeling lonely and staring at Lois?
Right.
Like, yeah, that doesn't feel, I don't know, it's creepy. But before we end this video off, I do have to point out, there's one more Christopher Reeve thing I would like to talk about. I don't know if you saw it. Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve story. It's a documentary you can watch on Max.
No, I that's actually come across my radar, but I haven't seen it.
It is one of the most beautiful documentaries I've seen in a long time. It hits everything you want to know about Christopher Reeve and everything you didn't know about Christopher Reeve. And it's like, okay, it covers the stuff leading up to Superman and his career and like how that blew him up, but it also covers his tragic paralysis and how he found the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. And how like a lot of the stuff that he was pushing for has led to people now being able to walk again.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful documentary, and they have his children in there. I dare you to watch this movie and not cry. It is sad because...
Oh, and this is super recent.
This came out last year. It's apparently the first thing that James Gunn's DC Studios has, like, actually supported and, like, released. Which, I mean, if this is what they're doing right off the gate, yeah. It's a great documentary. It definitely makes me look upon these films with much more love because these first couple films had passion behind them. And, yeah, even Christopher Reeve didn't like making 3 and 4. It's interesting because as Christopher Reeve, when he was still able to walk, he was kind of on this spiral of, like, not being with his kids, not doing stuff, and kind of, like, doing his own thing. And, like, it was an interesting thing of, like, because of his paralysis, he managed to be more in touch with his family and be more of the father that he never really had, which just, perfect documentary. And they also cover the relationship he had with, like, Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And other actors like William Hurt, Jeff Daniels, stuff like that. Just great documentary. Highly recommend it. If you love Superman, if you love movies, or if you just want to see a story about a man trying to, like, figure out his life after a horrible accident, great documentary. And in the spirit of that documentary, even though we don't get money off of these videos, I'll still leave a link to the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation in the description. So if you want to, like, donate to that, go right ahead. But yeah, that's it for the Christopher Reeve retrospective. Mixed bag, to say the least. But I don't know. I look upon these and I'm like, I'm looking more at the good and what stayed the same. Like, how Superman is a nice guy. He's supposed to be hopeful. He's supposed to be this. Like, not what every man is supposed to be, but what we should aspire to be like, at least try to be like. And I think these films nail that through and through. Even the bad ones still nail that in some way. Which makes it funny for what we're going to have to cover next time.
Which it's also going to be fun.
Oh, it's going to be so fun.
Just the other side of the coin that's been face down and hasn't touched the sun.
Yep, what great way to put it. Yeah. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap this video up regarding the Christopher Reeve era?
I think we said it earlier, like, Christopher Reeve did a great job of just, like, setting the benchmark of, like, this is Superman. And that becomes difficult to be iconic in that. I also think just, like, when people are watching these movies in order to kind of, like, you know, if they're a completionist and, like, getting ready for the next movie, I would say, like, appreciate the movies for what they are.
Look at these films as, like, an interesting time capsule. I don't know. Again, I think I've said it enough, like, just the gold standard.
Yeah.
Not perfect, not horrible, but just nice. And I think that's what Superman is just supposed to be. That's what Superman is. It's just nice.
Yeah.
Like, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment down below what you think of these Christopher Reeve Superman movies. I would love to hear what you have to say. Before I go, my name is Max Kellerhalls, and with me today I had...
Terrell Franklin.
All right. Hope you have a good day. Bye.